Well, good afternoon. Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome back to the Dad Cave channel. This is episode 2, or I think episode 3, I forget, of the Creative Mindset podcast. So thank you all for tuning in. And do me a favor, for those of you who are already here, make sure you hit that thumbs up button for me. Also invite your friends, family, because this is a family-friendly show. And comment down below. Let me know if you are new to the channel or if you are tuning in for the very first time. Uh, Give me a hello, thumbs up. Let me know where you're watching from, and welcome. So today is it's with a special friend of mine. He is a YouTuber himself. He has a woodworking channel. This channel that he has, he started back in May of 2021, and he already has amassed 923 subscribers. He is almost to 1,000, and maybe we can help him reaching that goal today. He's uploaded 60 videos on his channel, and it is Rick from the Weekend Woodshop. So you guys, welcome Rick to the show. Rick, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Jared. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So 923 subscribers. We're gonna, I don't know how close I can get you to 1,000. I don't have that kind of pull on YouTube yet, but we're gonna try and get you there. So if you guys, yeah, absolutely. So if you guys haven't had a chance to check out his channel prior to the show, I did post videos of some of the content from his channel on my community tab so that you guys can check it out prior to. So, but anyhow, if you get the chance, head on over to his channel, and we're going to be talking about things that focus on woodworking on a budget, trying to be humble, doing what we can, and doing more of what we like with what we have. That was kind of the theme that we kind of came up with today. So let's get right into it. So your woodworking channel is focused around the concept of creating budget-friendly projects like anyone can build with hand tools or budget-friendly power tools. Do you feel like new woodworkers put too much emphasis on high-end tool brands, thinking that it will level up their projects instead of focusing on mastering the skill through time-honored practice of success through trial and error? I know that was a lot. What are your thoughts?
It is. But I will say this. So the YouTube environment that we live in today, everybody wants to max level everything out as quickly as possible, right? And at its base level, woodworking isn't terribly difficult. It does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of practice to really get to really hone your skills. But yeah, I do think that a lot of times people will tune into a lot of YouTube content and they'll see, you know, like big, beautiful shops and high-end tools, and they automatically think, well, that's what I need, right? Everything that I have built in the last couple of years since I got back into woodworking, it has been with not the greatest tools that you can get. So yeah, I do believe that there is a little bit of a pull from a lot of the bigger YouTube channels. I know a lot of them try to go out of their way and say, look, you don't need this to be able to do woodworking, but a lot of them don't. And then you have a lot of people that see that and they're like, okay, well, I guess that's what I have to have. So let's go out and break the bank and break the budget and buy all the stuff. And then when the projects don't turn out the way that they want them to, maybe they get discouraged. And then that's when you find all the stuff on Facebook Marketplace because they lost interest because they spent a lot of money and they weren't able to make that beautiful armoire, you know? So yeah, I think so. I think that's a very valid statement.
Yeah, you made mention to something that I've very thankfully been able to utilize, and that is Facebook Marketplace. As a matter of fact, I've picked up some of my tools in the past directly as a result of that, because somebody did exactly what you just said, and that is, well, thought I was going to get into woodworking and I was going to make all these things, and I didn't. So their loss was my gain.
And going right along with that, people have, and myself, I fell into this little hole myself, is that, you know, you think, well, other people are building all these cute little trinkets and they're selling them on Etsy, and I can build all that, and you can build all that stuff, but being able to make something and being able to sell it are two completely different things. And then when you go and spend $5,000 on tools and you're not making any of that money back, that can be gut wrenching, you know? It's so, yeah.
Absolutely. You know what? We might have to have another episode to talk about that very topic. Somebody who, like yourself and me, who are making things to sell, um, that I think that's definitely a valid area of conversation.
Sure, I'd be glad to come back on. Absolutely.
I think we'll have to make that happen. Let us know in the comments. Is there anybody watching that has that same problem where you are trying to make something and then turn around and sell it? And what are the challenges you guys are running into? Let me know in the comments because we might be able to make a future episode around that. And also, by the way, this is a live Q&A that we are going to have at the end of the show. So if you do have a question, make sure you put that put a Q in front of your question for me so I can identify it in the chat. And from there, I will make sure that we cover those questions at the end. So hope you stick around for that. But if you do catch it on the replay to catch the answer to your question, I appreciate that too. So just don't forget, put a Q in front of your question. That way I know in the comments that you're asking a specific question. So kind of along the line of tools and cost, are there any
Mhm.
tool and or high-end tools that have caught your eye, and have you had the opportunity to upgrade, or if you did have the opportunity to upgrade, would you?
I haven't had an opportunity to really upgrade any of my tools per se. I've made some changes in the shop, and that's one of the topics that we're supposed to get into later on. Um, just the mindset in how I do my woodworking and the tools that I have available. But there are some tools that if money was no object, then there are a few tools that I would absolutely love to have. I would love to have a Festool domino. I would love to have a saw stop, table saw. I would love to have that. But also the focus of what I do here and the focus of my channel is, while those things, again, back to our first question, while those things are great, do you need them? And the answer to that question many times is no. They're a nice to have, but not a necessary to have. If I had the money, absolutely, I would want to get into some things like that. But at this point in time, I'll make do with what I've got.
Well, I absolutely agree, and yes, the Festool domino would certainly be on my list of
Mm-hmm.
tools, and there's a number of actually Festool items that I wouldn't mind giving a whirl in the shop, but then I look at the price tag and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
not that
exactly,
not that big of a fan.
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah, I
um,
bought the Wen track saw, and I bought it because of cost. I could have got the
right,
Festool, but did I need
yeah,
the Festool? No, this one cuts just as straight. So,
absolutely. I started my shop out with Ryobi tools. I still have them
hmm,
and I still use them. I haven't upgraded yet, but
yeah,
at some point this year I will be. So.
there you go, there you go.
Speaking of tools, some of the tools in your shop, they have a history behind them, and it's not
They do.
necessarily because of their age, but it's because they belong to your father.
That's
Um,
right.
are are there any particular tools in your shop that sparks memories for you as you're using them?
So unfortunately, the table saw that I inherited from my dad, it didn't last very long after I inherited it. It was an old Black and Decker, like, very first generation portable, like, project saw. It only measured about 24 to 26 inches across the table. It was only about 18 inches deep. You really couldn't cut anything with it. But every time I used that saw, I was on the back porch of our house as a teenager. I was in the backyard of our house as a teenager, helping my dad with little projects around the house. And every time I would use that saw, those memories would come back. And the same thing with the bandsaw. I do have a bandsaw over here in the corner that was his as well. So every time I use that, just a little flashback to, as I turn the power switch on or something like that. So yeah, there are definitely memories attached to all of the tools that I inherited from him. And even though the table saw is no longer with us, the motor for the table saw is back here in the back corner, and it's going to get used for something. One of my upcoming DIY tool projects, it has to include the motor from that saw. That just seems to be a fitting use of that saw and of that equipment to help let that live on. So that's the plan anyway.
So you got some Frankenstein projects coming up, and we actually dedicated a section to this podcast to talk about that because you got some things going on in your shop that I don't know a lot of people would take on. So we'll definitely talk more about that. So stay
Sure.
tuned for that, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Um, So you kind of got into a little bit about some of the tools that are in your shop. Breakdown of power tools. What do you have in your shop? What are you working with right now um, to accomplish the projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so I've got the probably the main focal point of the shop is the DIY table saw that I built coming up on, I guess it's been 2 years ago now. That's when Dad's table saw finally gave up the ghost, sadly, and I had to do something. So I decided I had been watching a lot of John Hyde, and he built his own table saw, and I was like, you know what, I like to tinker. That's something that I would really love to try. So I built my own table saw, and it's working great. I also inherited a miter saw from him, but it was very small, so I did upgrade that to a little bit bigger one. And then, of course, we got rid of the miter saw, so we don't even have a miter saw in the shop anymore. But as far as the rest of the tools that we do have, we've got the table saw, we have a Craftsman 12-inch bandsaw, we have a Craftsman drill press, we have a Milescraft small router table over here with a Craftsman router in it. I have a Harbor Freight 6-inch belt sander, disc sander combination device. I've got a portable drill stand over here. I've got my laser engraver, and I've got my Wen track saw, and then I have a 15-inch Grizzly planer over here in the corner. And I think that kind of hits the high points of all the tools that I have. I've got a lot of other little things, lots of clamps, lots of jigs and stuff that I've either made or have been gifted by my wife for Christmas. This year she got me a doweling jig. That's one of the reasons I don't need a Festool domino yet, because I have a doweling jig, and dowels work just as well as dominoes. So
Absolutely.
but yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Well, very cool. Well, you mentioned quite a it's a plethora of tool names that you just
Hmm.
went through.
Yeah.
How do you feel that older tools such as Craftsman, Grizzly, how do you feel that they stack up against tools from today, say DeWalt, Festool, Milwaukee? Is there a difference, in your opinion, on the quality or the craftsmanship that goes into those tools? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that there is a difference in the quality between some of the tools that I have and when they were made versus tools of today. If I were to stack my Grizzly planer up against a newer model Grizzly planer, I think the one that I have would probably outperform the newer Grizzly planer. I actually have a friend who does woodworking as well. He has a Grizzly drum sander, and he's not satisfied with it. Like it's hard to adjust. It's real finicky. The construction quality isn't the greatest. But there are other tool manufacturers out there that do a phenomenal job. I think more than anything, and that it has the potential of getting you into the whole my brand is better than your brand argument. But do your homework, right? If you
Right.
want a new tool, absolutely read the reviews. Don't go on to the Facebook groups or YouTube channel comment sections and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this. What do you think? Because you're going to get everyone in the world that is either going to be for it or against it, and they're going to beat you up over it. But if you read the reviews, the honest reviews of a tool or a product, I think you're going to be in a much better position to make an educated decision. And then, of course, on top of everything, not only do you have to pay attention to the reviews of that product, but also pay attention to your budget. Get the best tool that you can find for the budget that you have. I don't subscribe to the buy once, cry once philosophy. I would rather build up to that. I would rather build up to that pinnacle tool that I want, rather than breaking the bank trying to get there, which is again why we're in the shop that we're in.
Right.
But older stuff was built to last. I think a lot of people would agree with that statement. I have had no trouble at all out of any of the old tools that I have in my shop. Because they were built with to a much better standard, I think. And then also they were built in such a way where they were serviceable. Like they weren't built in such a way where you had to take the entire thing completely apart to get to that one bearing that might have went bad. Everything in this shop is serviceable to most rudimentary level mechanics or entry level mechanics. So older stuff, if you can find it, it's worth its weight in gold.
Oh no, I completely agree. Like you, I had some of the tools that I have in my shop were actually tools that belonged to my grandfather.
Hmm.
Not only just hand tools, but also a few select power tools. And
Hmm.
even though they've been around since, I mean, before I was even around,
Hmm.
they're still kicking, they're still
Yeah,
moving.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
are they big, monstrous, heavy, cumbersome things to lug around? Sure, but it works.
It,
So,
it absolutely works.
um, in a recent video, you recently decided to remove your miter saw. You mentioned that earlier, and you
Yeah,
opted for a track saw instead.
I did.
Um, what made you decide to give up that tool? Uh, I mean, there are some woodworkers out there that are probably scratching their heads if they're watching this and they're saying to themselves, "Why would he do that?" I've seen people; their shops are all dedicated to a miter saw throne,
Yes.
practically. I mean, they build a whole huge bench around it, cabinets,
Yep.
everything, and that was the one tool that everybody's, like, really proud of, but you decided to take it out and said, "No, no more, it's out."
Yeah.
What possessed you to do that?
Well, the reason I did that, it goes back to something that you and I were talking about in the pre-stream. It's space. So I only have half of this garage. It's a two-car garage. I only get half of it, and my wife is very particular about the vehicle that we have, and she would like it to be inside and protected from the elements and the weather. And my woodworking stuff has steadily and slowly encroached on her half of the garage. So I had to make some really tough decisions as far as
You and me both.
what do I have room for? What do I have room for? And can I do this job just as well with something else? And what I found was in looking at different videos for different creators who do have a miter saw and a track saw, which saw do they use more often? A lot of them actually are using the track saw more often. And so I looked at what I had to cross cut, and the miter saw that I had wasn't a very deep cut. It wasn't a sliding bevel. And so it didn't make sense for me to have a big cumbersome tool taking up valuable workspace, valuable storage space that I could use for other things. And so with the track saw that I have now, if I need to make a crosscut on a board, that's easy enough to do right here on the workbench. I lay it out, I put the track saw down, I make my cuts, and then everything can get put away back where it belongs. And I have my workbench, and I'm slowly getting all of that stuff that's on the other side of the garage out of the way so that the other members of my household can be happy, and so can I.
Comment below, anybody else have similar problems? I do. So,
Yeah, yeah,
um, very very cool. So I think you kinda answered my next question. That was, were there any limitations to no longer having a miter saw? But it sounds like, whatever opportunities the miter saw afforded, it seems like you're being able to work through them with just having the track saw.
yeah. I think so. Probably the only thing that I would the only regret that I might have is that with the miter saw, there's no setup, right? You mark the board, you set a stop block, whatever you got to do. You come over, you turn the saw on, you make your cut. With the track saw, then you've got some fiddling you got to do. You've got to make sure that you can get the parts layout on the bench. You've got to make sure that the track is supported. You've got to make your cuts. You've got to do more setup to make the cuts with a track saw. But in the grand scheme of things, is that a cumbersome thing to do? For me, in a quote unquote hobby shop, it's not that bad. If I were upscaling to a more production shop where I was making more things for more people, then maybe a miter saw would make more sense. But for me, it's just as easy to just use the miter saw, or not. Sorry, to use the track saw and just not have a track saw or have a miter saw in the shop.
Well, I will say that you're pretty brave for doing that. I don't know that I would
Yeah,
give it up my miter
I'm
saw.
not the only one. I'm not the only one. Keith Brown from Rag and Bone Brown, he did the same thing. He got rid of his miter saw too. So
Well, I have the Craig, rip cut jig, that you
sure, yeah,
attach onto the, um, why can't I think of it? Your
Oh, like a hook onto a
the
circular
skill
saw?
saw. Yes,
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
yes, I have that. I've only used it maybe a handful of times. I still
Hmm.
kind of stick with my miter saw. So,
Sure.
um, so you also have a tool in your shop that doesn't fit the category of old and new because you built it yourself.
Correct.
And you mentioned that earlier. You made your own table saw, and you
Did.
also touched on why you made the table saw because the one that you had died. Um, but aside from needing a table saw and the previous one dying, why on earth would you decide to build your own table saw?
I think, therefore, I am. It was. I like to tinker. I like to take things apart. I like to find out how they work, why they work, what makes them do the things that they do, and the sheer challenge of putting together a table saw from raw materials and making it so that that table saw would, that you can raise and lower the blade, that you can tilt the blade, setting up my own miter slots, building my own table saw fence. Uh, just the challenge of being able to do that ultimately, that's why I did it. I could have, for the same amount of money that I invested in building this saw, I could have went out and got a job site saw and built it into my workbench, just like the table saw that I had of my dad's was. But in the end, I don't think I would have been happy because I like to change things, and I like the challenge. And sitting here for 6 months, figuring out what size lead screw I want to use to try and get the blade to raise and lower, and how to get the gears to mesh with each other in such a way that it doesn't skip a tooth or anything like that. It was all a challenge, and I loved every minute of it.
Well, it definitely does sound like a challenge, and it's one that I don't know that a lot of people would take on. But why should somebody build their own table saw? But then at the same time, why shouldn't somebody build their own table saw?
So that's a great question, and I actually put out a couple of pro and con videos after I built the table saw on if I were to do it again, why would I do it again? If I weren't to do it again, why wouldn't I? Um, and it all goes back to, again, my personality. I like to figure out how things work, but I know every inch of this table saw. I know everything about it. I know all the parts. I know where the parts came from. I know how they were assembled. And so if something goes wrong with this saw, I know exactly where to go to fix it. I just had to take it apart over the yesterday before I was able to do a little bit of woodworking yesterday, because I had to free up some of the bearings and such for getting the lift mechanism to work. And I knew exactly where to go to do that. Now, that also answers the question of why wouldn't you want to do this? Because if you go to a store and buy a table saw, as long as you perform regular routine maintenance on it, you're not going to have a whole lot of trivial little menace type failures on it. The saw is going to work pretty much every single time. So is that something that you as an individual are willing to take on? That would be the reason why you wouldn't want to do it, is if you don't have the time to maintain your own saw, if you don't have the skill sets to maintain your own saw, then don't build one. Go out, spend the money, buy a good one, find one that fits your budget, find one that'll do the things you want it to do, and buy it. But if you like the challenge, if you like to be able to be in control of your own destiny, so to speak, build a saw.
Well, you certainly would be in control of your own destiny at that point. The other thing that you would really be in control of, or possibly not, I mean, we're talking also safety concerns. And
Correct.
I think anytime that you consider, anytime that you're going to use tools in general, even if they're hand tools, power tools, there is a level of respect that has to come with it so that you can
Absolutely.
maintain maintain a place of a mindset of safety.
Correct.
Uh, but what steps have you taken to ensure that this table saw is safe to use? And are there any safety features that you added into it to make sure that it's hopefully safe, kind of safe to use?
So this table saw is going to be just as safe to use as let's see here. The only safety feature there are two safety features this saw does not have. Number one, it doesn't have flesh sensing technology like a saw stop would have. So if you touch the blade, you're gonna get hurt, right? If that blade is spinning, if you touch the blade, you are going to get hurt. But that's every saw out there except for saw stop, right?
Right.
The other safety feature that this saw does not have is it does not have an over-the-top blade guard. It does have a riving knife. It does have an emergency NVR switch type stop. So if the power gets disconnected, the saw will stop and it will not come on again until you push the on button. And again, it has the riving knife in the back to keep the wood from pinching back in on the back side of the blade, which will hopefully help against kickback. I've been using table saws for the better part of my life off and on. I know that all 10 of these are going to stay attached to my body because I'm not going to put my fingers anywhere near that blade while it's spinning. And exactly. And
comment below how many fingers everybody still has.
Yeah, exactly. And the only thing that really does concern me is that possibility of kickback. And I've done everything that I can do to make sure that everything is in adjustment. Everything, the miter slots are parallel to the blade. The rip fence is parallel to the miter slots. I've got the riving knife in back behind the blade. And I've done everything that I can think of to do to keep that potential for kickback as minimal as possible. Are you ever going to be able to 100% stop a kickback? No. But make sure that your hands are in the right places when you're using the saw so that if a kickback does happen, that your hands aren't going to get pushed towards the blade. At the end of the day, that's really all we can do unless we have a saw stop.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I've been watching some videos recently from Matt over on the 731 Woodworks channel, and he's been putting out some videos recently about plans for the Congress here in the United States to actually enact laws around the safety technologies that are going into table saws. So that same saw stop technology that they have, they're talking about wanting to try to have a mandate that manufacturers have to implement that into their saws, and I think they're even talking about job site saws too. So
yeah, and I'm curious about that because there's a lot of laws like that already exist in like the UK,
right.
And from what I've seen, like in a DIY shop such as mine, I don't have any employees, so I wouldn't be governed by those laws. It would be more for like commercial shops.
Right.
And I can absolutely see the benefit of that. Like if you've got employees that are working for you, you're as an employer, you're responsible for making sure that your employees are at least in an environment where they are as safe as can be. You can't stop. You can't. I don't like say. Well, I do like saying this. You can't fix stupid. If somebody's going to do a really foolish thing, there's not a whole lot you can do to stop that. But if you put safeguards in place like saw stop technology to pull the blade away from flesh, then at least you are minimizing the damage, so to speak.
Right.
I don't know that we'll ever come to a day where, like I can't strap a skill saw to the bottom of a piece of plywood and just make my own table saw in the privacy of my own home. But I can absolutely 100% agree that kind of thing does not need to be in a production shop. Like people need to be in a workplace that's safe. So
yeah,
or as
absolutely.
safe as can be.
Any plans of Frankenstein and the other power tools in your shop?
Absolutely. I've got all kinds of ideas running around in my head right now. I have kicked around the idea of building my own joiner. I've kicked around the idea of not necessarily Frankensteining it, but building some replacement parts for the Craftsman bandsaw. Some of the guides are kind of worn out, and they could use some replacement. And honestly, it's an older saw, so the parts are harder to come by, and so they're kind of expensive. And if I can build those parts, then that's great. The big project that's on my agenda right now, it's the one that I've already started designing and securing materials for, is a CNC router. I want to build my own CNC router, probably about a 48 by 48 inch, so that I can
I'm
flatten out cutting boards and stuff like that, and not have to worry about sending it to a planer or a drum sander. I've also thought about building a drum sander.
I'm curious to check those out. So if you guys are interested in that as well, make sure you go and head on over after the stream to the Weekend Woodshop channel and make sure you subscribe. Hit those bell notifications so you're notified when he does go and upload those videos. And by the way, I do have your questions marked. So for those of you dropping questions in the comments, I've got them starred and we'll be getting to them shortly. So thank you for those. Just make sure you put a Q in front of those comments so that I can identify them as questions. So, um, Rick, along the lines of Frankenstein and your own power tools, you have a video that's gotten over 34,000 views
Yeah.
where you made your own right angle clamps.
Yeah.
Is there an advantage to building your own right angle clamps instead of buying them?
Um, Again, you're controlling your own destiny. You can make them as accurate as you can make them. I think we all have dreams of one day owning those red anodized aluminum clamps made by Woodpecker. Like that would be a great tool to have in the shop, right? Woodpecker has kind of become a status symbol, just like SawStop. But back to the beginning of the stream, time honored traditions of honing your skills. Any woodworker out there should be able to make their own right angle clamps. You should be able to figure out how to make 4 saw cuts total, and make a piece of wood that you can use to clamp things together at 90 degrees to each other. And I think that is a great use of your spare time and your scrap wood. Those clamps that I made, these clamps right here, I've had these clamps now since I put that video out, and they are still square. Yes, they're all beat up, and yes, they've been used on a number of projects, but they work, right? And they are 90 degrees, 100%. And being able to make something like this so that you don't have to go out and spend 60, 70, 100, $150 on a set of clamps, like that's money well spent, that's time well spent, and it's something that you can be proud of. Like, these are going to last me for a long time. Will I ever buy a pair of right angle clamps? Maybe. I might just build another set. I don't know.
Well, I think you kind of answered my next question. That is, what advice would you give to anybody that was considering making them? But now it sounds more like a challenge. Like you must make your own right angle
I
clamps.
really think everyone should build their own set of clamps, or their own set of right angle jigs, at least. The more things that you can make in your shop, the more time you're actually pursuing the hobby that you've chosen. Anybody can
and,
go out and buy tools. Anybody
and
can do
honing
that.
your skills
And
at the same
honing
time.
your skills. Exactly.
Absolutely. Great tip. Um, so since we're kind of talking about honing your skills and building a skill set that is going to benefit you in the long run, um, recommendations for beginning tool purchases. Is there a benefit to buying new versus buying used? And are there any tools that you would recommend buying new versus used?
Um, if you have no idea what you're buying, I would recommend buying new. If you buy something new, then you're probably going to get 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, 97 times out of 100, you're going to, excuse me, I'm sorry, you're going to get something out of the box that's going to work first time. If you have done this before, if like me a couple of years ago, if you're getting back into the hobby after taking a few years off and you know what you're looking for, then scour Facebook Marketplace, eBay, things like that, and see if you can find tools that will work for you. I would absolutely try to find tools from folks that'll let you look at it before you buy it. But then at the same time, there's nothing wrong with, you said you use Ryobi. Most of the hand tools, most of the battery operated tools that I have in my shop are Craftsman. There's nothing wrong with low end. It may not last as long as the professional grade Milwaukee's or things like that. But at the same time, does it need to? Again, in the beginning, you're honing your skills. You're trying to figure out if this is a hobby that's going to last for you. So getting inexpensive stuff that you can use to get your feet wet is not a bad thing to do. Your chisels don't need to be Narex chisels. They can come from Harbor Freight. My Japanese pole saw over here, it comes from Harbor Freight. I've got another small one that is an upgrade. That's a Kaizen saw, and it came off of Amazon. But I still didn't spend a lot of money for them. So find inexpensive things that will help you figure out if you like tools or not. And then if it doesn't work out, at least you're not waist deep in expenses.
Yes, and certainly if you have a significant other, it keeps them happy and it keeps you in their good graces too, right?
And also talk to them before you buy stuff, because if stuff just starts showing up in the shop, then they wonder where it all came from and how much it cost.
Well, funny story, and I'll share this with you guys. My wife already knows this, so I'm not going to get in trouble for sharing this. But at some point in time, when you get your shop to a certain level of having stuff in it,
Hmm.
tools, especially if you have tools on a wall, things like that, you kind of are able to get away with sneaking a few things in here and there, and nobody's the wiser. Um,
Right.
Prime example, I think it was, when did I buy it? I recently I started I'm slowly starting my Milwaukee upgrades after
Okay.
going, and I mean I had everything Ryobi from when I first started.
Yeah.
But I recently and business purchases, so not personal funds, business funds,
Hmm.
recently started upgrading. And one of the things that I did is I bought some of the Milwaukee packouts,
Hmm.
specifically the small parts organizers that you can mount on the wall. It has the mounting plate and everything. And I saw them when they came out, and I was like, one day, you will be mine. And
Hmm.
so when it finally came time to actually purchase some, I did. Now, did I mount them the same day? Not exactly. I brought them in and I kind of put them on the garage floor off to the side for a little bit,
Hmm.
let them collect a little bit of dust. That way they look like they've been there for a minute. They're not shiny
Oh
brand
dear.
new.
Oh
And
my.
then I went and I put them up on the wall. And yeah, she did notice it. By the way, that's her giving the thumbs up. Um, she noticed it, but not right away. She came out one day and she's like, "Where did you get those?" And I'm like,
Oh, they've been sitting over there
"What,
on the
those?" I'm
floor for
like,
months.
"They've been." I said, "I've had them for a while. I just not mounted them." And so, funny story. Once your shop gets to a certain size, you can kind of sneak some things in there, and nobody really notices.
Don't ever do that. Never sneak stuff in. Don't ever do that.
It was pretty funny. So, but one day I'll have some more Milwaukee stuff. I'm actually looking at that new Milwaukee M12 oscillating tool, or not the
Oh
oscillating
yeah.
tool, the orbital sander that they have.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I look at that's I think that's going to be my next one. Um, so that kind of goes into my next question is, when should you start looking at upgrading from lesser quality tools to maybe higher end tools? Where's that balance? Because I think that's something else that a lot of people struggle with. I know I always wanted to go and immediately like go out and buy like like you see everybody's got a DeWalt table saw, everybody's got
Hmm.
DeWalt, like Milwaukee seems to be getting in the woodworking game lately.
Yes.
So when do you upgrade from lesser quality tools to higher end tools? What is that threshold, do you think?
So I think that threshold for me would be, pay attention to how often you're using specific tools. And when you have a tool that is the go-to tool, like this is the tool that I use every single day on every single job, maybe that's the tool that you upgrade first. It might be a hammer, it might be a screwdriver, it might be a chisel, it might be a saw. But the tool, put them in an order of hierarchy, because the tools that you use the most are the tools that you want to be the most comfortable with. And while I said earlier that you don't need high-end tools to do a lot of stuff, high-end tools do definitely make a difference. I will absolutely honor that statement, because I know that there are people out there that are like, well, yeah, but if you use a cheap tool, you're going to end up with a cheap product. There is some truth to that. good tools help to create good projects, but only in the hands of people that know how to use them. So if you find yourself constantly using a same tool, but it just doesn't feel right in the hand, it just doesn't, you want to upgrade that tool first. I think at least that's the way I look at it.
No, I think you're right about that. Right now, my tool upgrade list, I'm looking at upgrading my table saw. I'm not going to build mine. I don't have the time to do it. So I will
That's fair.
I will forever bow down to you for making your own table saw. But that is something that I use a lot, and it's something that is for me something that I think needs to be elevated in my shop, just based upon uses, like you said. So I think that for me, that's where I'm looking at.
Sure, that makes
Still
perfect
kind of
sense.
on the fence on what brand. I think I want to go corded versus cordless, so that's going to put Milwaukee out. So I think I'll probably end up going DeWalt. I used the DeWalt table saw when I helped my brother-in-law put in his laminate flooring throughout his house, and I really liked it. And I especially liked the fence and the micro adjustment knob that they had on there. I really like that, so I might have to.
Yeah, any of them newer table saws that have a micro adjuster on the fence, those are nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I will absolutely give you that. Those are nice.
I like this comment. Real men sneak things into the shed all the time. It's a male DD thing.
Yes, it is.
I have to agree.
Yes, it is.
So that was kind of all the questions that I had for you, and did have some questions in the chat. So if you guys have any other questions that you wanted to ask, go ahead, put them in the chat now. Make sure you put a Q in front of it. But I'm going to pull up the first one right now.
Okay.
And let me get back to it here. So R Silver Sorensen says, do any of you think you build more exactly measuring with inches or centimeters, and why do you think one is more exactly than other? If so, I think what he's asking.
I know this individual. He's actually a
Okay.
follower from my other channel.
Oh, very cool.
We have this argument a lot over imperial versus metric measurements. Now I use both in my shop. As a matter of fact, I have a Craftsman tape measure right here, and it is in inches and millimeters.
Okay.
And it depends on what I'm making. I will say this. I am born and bred American. I have grown up on the imperial system. I will use it until the day I die. But I will say this: it's easier to build stuff in metric.
Is it really?
It's easier to build stuff in metric. Finding metric hardware here in the States is hard sometimes.
Right.
But it's very easy to get precise length.
Well, yes, precise
millimeters. Yeah,
right.
It's absolutely easy to do metric.
Well, and I think depending upon what you're working on too, because when you start getting into like machining or metalworking, stuff like that, and you're needing precision, that's where something like this comes into handy. This is actually my ruler that I use for when I'm measuring things for my laser engraver, because my laser engraver, when I bought it in the measurements in millimeters, not inches, specifically for that reason, just because of precision. But I don't know that I can see. My tape measures are all in inches, all four of them. I have like four. I feel like you can't. I feel like you can't call yourself a woodworker till you have like at least 4 tape measures. Because you always end up losing one throughout the day.
That's true. And on the table saw, I have a sliding rip fence on there, and the tape measure that I put on there is in inches and metric as well.
I didn't catch that when I watched that video. Oh, wow. Okay.
It's metric and imperial. So I'm slowly getting to the point where all of the measuring stuff that I can do in the shop, I can do either imperial or metric.
Okay. I might, I don't know. I'm curious. I might have to go start looking at some tape measures and kind of play around with that. But I am always thrown off a little bit sometimes when I watch other people's videos and they throw out metric measurements, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I automatically
that a lot lately.
Yeah.
This is going to
So,
be 1 inch, so that's 25.4 centimeter or 25.4 millimeters. Okay, good to know.
so he brings up another question, and we were kind of talking about DeWalt tools as far as table saws and things like that. But
Hmm.
what about Bosch? I, I don't have the only experience I've had with Bosch tools. My brother-in-law has a giant. It's a it's one of those jackhammering drills. It's a
Hmm.
Bosch.
Yeah.
The thing is just a tank, and but I know that
Yes.
I know a lot of people that like to do uh, power carving or routing. They
Hmm.
use Bosch routers. I see those a lot on
Yep.
other people's channels, videos. I haven't used them personally, but what about you? Have you had any experience with Bosch tools?
Back in my construction days, I used to work as a construction electrician years ago, and back in my construction days, there were several job sites that had a significant number of Bosch tools on them for big, again, for big heavy type work. Um, I think there may be an oceanic divide when it comes to Bosch versus some of the other tool brands that we have here. We have Bosch here in the States, but you don't find a lot of
Right.
people, at least I haven't, you don't find a lot of people that use Bosch here in North America. Maybe Canada, I don't know, but it's very prominent in a lot of European countries. A lot of the European makers that I watch in my spare time, they all have Bosch tools in their shops. Whereas a lot of the American makers that I watch, they don't. So they're going to have, Festool it bridges the gap. Everybody's got that. But here in the States, you see a lot of DeWalt, you see a lot of Milwaukee, you see a lot of
Right.
Saw Stop for saws or Powermatic, but you don't see a lot of Bosch power tools from the American makers, whereas you see a ton of it from the European makers. So maybe it's a divide that way. I don't know. I will say this: in the few instances that I've had where I've used Bosch tools, they are amazing. They're very well built, and they're very durable, and they're very powerful. And I would, if it came down to being able to buy a new tool that where I had a choice of getting a Bosch, I would consider it. I definitely would consider it.
It's interesting you mentioned that about just the general availability of Bosch power tools, and I can't even think the last time I've been to either Home Depot or Lowe's or anywhere
Yeah.
for that matter. I can't recall seeing Bosch tools there. I mean, I see Ryobi, I see um, Makita, DeWalt,
Milwaukee.
Rigid,
Yeah.
yeah, but
But not very much. I
I
see a
haven't seen
lot of
Bosch.
Bosch like saw blades and drill bits, but I don't see a lot of Bosch
Yes,
tools.
yeah. Hmm. I'll have to keep an eye out next time
Yeah, me
what
too.
am I talking about? As soon as I get done here, I'm going to Home Depot. So I might take a look while I'm over there just out of
Yeah, sure.
curiosity. So, um, well, if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the comments. Those are all the questions that I've seen so far in the chat. By the way, thank you guys for participating and also, giving us your feedback and being a part of the conversation within the chat there. I appreciate it. And don't forget, if you haven't done so already, and for those of you catching this on the replay, make sure you head on over to the Weekend Woodshop and go check out some of his videos and give him a subscribe if you would. If you're subscribed to my channel, you should be subscribed to his. So definitely go show him some love. You're how many subscribers away from 1,000? You're
77, I think, at last count.
77. Okay.
Yep.
So the Dad Cave community, y'all got some work to do. We need 77 more subscribers to head on over to the Weekend Woodshop. Go over there, subscribe. And on this channel, we're almost to 2,000. So
Yes, I saw that.
we're cranking. So, but Rick, thank you for being on this show or on the podcast. I do appreciate it,
Absolutely.
and I think we may have to, like I said, may have to schedule another episode. Um, I forgot what we were going to talk about, but we were talking about selling stuff.
Yeah.
So if you guys
Selling
are
stuff.
interested, yeah, if you guys are like Rick and I, where you're actually making things to sell, and you're wondering about ways to level up that, also find ways to maybe get your products out to more people and start getting some orders and building up some confidence, maybe we can talk about setting up another podcast for that. So if it's something you're interested in, you want to know more about, let us know in the comments, and I'm sure we can probably make that happen. So
Sure can.
but well, Rick, thanks for being on the program. I appreciate it, and we will see you all
Anytime.
in the next one.